All right, so this is video C, the third video in my little series on how to make your reading exciting, and we haven't even gotten to the reading yet. Okay, so Hebrews 9. All right, so Hebrews is an epistle, and we're just going to go to the pericope, and I'm just going to kind of go through this process. This is what I would do if I had this assignment, Hebrews 9:23 to 28. So I got to read it first. I mean, like, I actually have to look at it. So I may regret this one, but okay. So Hebrews 9:23 through 28. Just going to read it. Thus it was necessary for the sketches of the heavenly things to be purified with these rites, R-I-T-E-S, rites. But the heavenly things themselves need better sacrifices than these. For Christ did not enter a sanctuary made by human hands, a mere copy of the true one, but he entered into heaven itself, now to appear in the presence of God on our behalf. Nor was it to offer himself again and again, as the high priest enters the holy place year after year with blood that is not his own, for then he would have had to suffer again and again since the foundation of the world. But as it is, he has appeared once for all at the end of the age to remove sin by the sacrifice of himself. And just as it is appointed for mortals to die once, and after that the judgment, so Christ, having been offered once to bear the sins of many, will appear a second time, not to deal with sin, but to save those who are eagerly waiting for him. Oh my. Okay, so that is that. And I part of the difficulty of being who I am, it's not necessarily a difficulty, but part of my situation, let's put it that way, is that I'm trying to read this flat without faking it. Okay, I'm talking about acting values here, but I don't want to act this too much and, almost in mockery of people who read it in a different way. So all that I'm trying to do is to read it sort of flatly this time, and I'm using the punctuation to define phrases. So wherever there's a comma, I have a little pause. Where there's a full stop or a period, I give a slightly longer pause. I'm looking to see that there's also a semicolon between the 25th and the 26th verse. That gets essentially the same pause as a comma in terms of length. So that pretty much covers, in terms of punctuation. There are no question marks here. So there are no questions, whether rhetorical or actual, that are being raised. There are no quotations. So there's no need to give any kind of separate voice to a passage or to give any kind of uplift of something to indicate that there's quotation marks, without going like this while you're reading. There's no exclamation point, so there's no need for special strong emphasis. Now, one of the things that I did learn from years of study with the then president of the Pennsylvania Actors Company, who also happened to be my drama teacher in high school, was that at the end of any phrase, instead of dropping your energy, you should slightly raise your energy. Now, this gets to be a little, sometimes people will do this and turn it into kind of a question, which is not really what you want to do. You don't want to give that kind of a curve to your sound. I mean, unless it's the way that you do it, in which case, but what you want to avoid is losing volume and losing the phrase at the end of a phrase. So, for Christ did not enter a sanctuary made by human hands. You don't have to raise it like that, but you don't want to lose it. And pardon me for doing this, because you really shouldn't model things not to do, but I'm going to try to give an indication of like what would be less effective. For Christ did not enter a sanctuary made by human hands. Okay, we've lost it. We don't know what's going, like, where are we going? You have to keep the energy going through the whole phrase. And that also means that as you're practicing, you need to find a way to keep the flow, to keep enough breath in your lungs, to carry through the phrase. So you have to find a way to take in enough breath that you're not pausing before the phrase is over. And I know that there are other ways of doing this, and there are ways of breaking things up. I mean, listen to the British royal family, and you see some interesting ways of chopping up phrases. I don't necessarily recommend, but if you have an extraordinarily long phrase and you don't have enough lung power to carry it, I suppose you can model yourself on Charles III. Anyhow, so take a nice breath, because the first verse of Hebrews chapter 9 is a bit longish. So, thus it was necessary for the sketches of the heavenly things to be purified with these rites, but the heavenly things themselves need better sacrifices than these. So, a basic point here is to try to find out what are the key words in the sentence, just as a sentence, okay? We're not even trying to figure out what sketches, what are we talking about? It's not even looking at meaning, except in a very strict sort of grammatical sense. So it's clear that the sketches of heavenly things, whatever that is, and I have no idea, I have a very limited understanding of what that could possibly be. But the sketches of heavenly things to be purified with these rites, but the heavenly things themselves need better sacrifices than these. So the key words are necessary, sketches of heavenly things, purified, rites, heavenly things, again, better sacrifices, these. And just, again, without even trying to work down into the specific meaning here, you're just getting the grammar and figuring out from the grammar what are the key elements. Now, again, it's hard for me to know. I mean, it's almost impossible for me to know, you watching this, what your experience is. For me, this seems pretty self-evident, but, I had a peculiar experience as a kid, and I read a lot. And I enjoyed reading. And the kinds of things that I read were more like the Bible than not. And I enjoyed reading the Bible. So not everybody does. And, to each their own. And there are portions of the Bible, and I'm sure this is true for you too, there are portions that I like better than others. And I got to tell you, this is a little hard for me. I mean, it's like moving outside of my comfort zone. Hebrews, okay? It's part of the reason why I chose for this example. Okay, so just that first phrase, I want to massage it a little bit, like I said earlier. So, thus it was necessary for the sketches of the heavenly things to be purified with these rites, but the heavenly things themselves need better sacrifices than these. Now, one of the techniques that I'm not sure where I picked this up. It wasn't actually in drama class. It wasn't one of the things that was emphasized in any of my drama classes. But somewhere along the line, somebody suggested, I don't think this is something that I came up with on my own, but it was suggested to me that to try to get a sense of what you're reading and where the different emphases fall, especially if you're having difficulty reading like philosophy or religion, these are often very difficult kinds of texts to read. And we become really very serious about it. And because we become very, we think, I've got to treat this very carefully, and I just don't really get it. To break that up a little bit, you can make a funny voice and read it in your funny voice. And I really think that you'll be forgiven for doing this as long as you don't do it in the final performance. This is something that you're doing as part of your practice, as part of your development. All right? So, I like to do a lot of accents. So, pardon me if you don't think that this is a funny voice. I'm just saying an odd voice. A besonders voice. So, just a strange kind of thing to do. Something to break it up. And so that you're not, you're thinking about something else than what you're reading, right? So, thus it is necessary for the sketches of the heavenly things to be purified with these rites, but the heavenly things themselves need better sacrifices than these. If that's helpful, use it, Whatever you find that helps you to break through, to get to a fuller understanding of what the phrases are. And you're just trying to hit the phrases so that you can convey, in this sense, it's more than anything else, it's the grammatical sense, and to some degree the rhetorical sense. What do I mean by grammar? I mean, there are nouns here, there are adjectives, there are verbs. Which are the most important words? Thus, it, was, for, the, of, to, be. with? You know, are those the important words? Even themselves, is that like as important as necessary sketches of the heavenly things? Whatever that may mean, I don't know. Sacrifices, you know, it's not that they're the longer words necessarily, because love can be, it's a short word, but it can be a pretty important word, or God, you know, can be an important word, even though it's short. So it's not length, it's just how it functions in the sentence. And you're reading the sentence, like, okay, please don't ask me to explain what the sketches of the heavenly things may mean, or what this has to, or what sacrifices, why there are better sacrifices, or even what the these are that this refers to, because for some reason we've been plunked down into the middle of this thing and says thus. Thus means like, in conclusion, but we don't know what came before it. I mean, in church, okay? So you're in church, you're reading this thing, and there it is, and you say, here, receive the word of the Apostle Paul to the Hebrews, or whoever it is who wrote Hebrews, to the Hebrews, and here it is, it's the epistle, and now we're going to read it, and it's from the New Testament. Thus, it was necessary. Like, what? Thus? It's so weird. It's like, why did you do this to us, people from the Common Lectionary? Why didn't you say, but read this passage, but just cut off the thus, you know? And I suppose you could do it, but the verse does start with thus, so you do it, but it's a little weird. Okay, now we'll all live through it, I'm sure. Okay, so shall I do it again? Okay. Thus it was necessary for the sketches of the heavenly things to be purified with these rites, but the heavenly things themselves need better sacrifices than these. Now, let me say too something about this. The more you do it, the more okay, so I'm starting to get this. Like, I'm actually starting to get a sense of what in the world this might actually be about, because I've read it about 5 or 6 times now, right? And it's starting to sort of click, like, okay. So there are 2 parts here to this passage. Thus it was necessary for the sketches of the heavenly things to be purified with these rites, but the heavenly things themselves need better sacrifices than these. Okay, so we're talking about the sketches of the heavenly things and the heavenly things themselves. And this becomes clear again simply through the grammar. The use of that little word, and this is why I say little words are not necessarily unimportant, but. So you've got one phrase and another phrase linked by the comma and the but, comma, but. And you as the reader should make that grammar evident, and that's why you have to give different tonality to your phrasing. So if you read it very robotically, thus it was necessary for the sketches of the heavenly things to be purified with these rites, but the heavenly things themselves need better sacrifices than these. You're not really helping people out to understand this, because it's strange. And if it's not strange to you, if you're like, well, I know exactly what he's writing about here. It's the heavenly things themselves and the sketches of the heavenly things. Doesn't everybody know what that means? Well, great. But you want to convey that to your audience or to the congregation. Okay? So you got to think, how am I going to make this, how am I going to bring this out? Okay. Now, one of the things that I do, and it's a little bit difficult to illustrate. I mean, I can tell you about it, but it it's easier to show. So I'm going to go to another video and actually demonstrate what I'm doing so that you can see this. But I think that it's very useful to break down the phrases so that as I'm learning them, I'm not really learning them, reading them directly from the Bible text, like this, but I break them down in a different way, and that helps me to build the both the meaning for myself and the meaning for people to whom I'm reading. So I'll come back to that.